Okay, looks like we might have a slowdown in people joining. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Again, make sure you're introducing yourself in the chat. We're going to go ahead and get started on the implementing best practices into SNAP ENT programs training. So very happy that you're all able to make it today. This training was designed for state SNAP ENT and FNS staff, and it's hosted by Mathematica and Social Policy Research Associates. I'm going to go over just a little bit of housekeeping. So for today, we're going to have a lot of people here today. So right now we have 89 participants in the training. So even though we have a lot of people, we do want to make it as interactive as possible. So feel free to turn your camera on if you want to during the presentation and content portion. If you prefer to wait until we break into small group activities, that's fine as well, but allows for a little bit more interaction if you can see the people that you're chatting with. Also, because there's so many people, you will have questions during the presentation. We just ask that you add them into the chat. We'll be having some staff monitoring the chat for questions that we might want to ask, or during some designated Q&A time. If we have time to allow people to unmute and ask, we will allow for that as well. But if you have questions, feel free to add them in the chat at any time. Let's see. Also, just so everyone is aware that there is the ability to look at subtitles. So we do have some transcription happening. So under the more, you should be able to see subtitles by clicking more or the three little dots. And then you can click show subtitles. So if that's helpful for you, that is available as well. I'm going to move forward and just introduce our presenters. My name is Dallas Oberle. I am with Social Policy Research Associates. And I'm going to turn it over to our two presenters, Madeline and Ann, to introduce themselves. Madeline?
Hi, everyone. I'm Madeline Levin here at SPR. I'm a senior associate and work on our SNAP and SNAP employment and training research with Ann.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Paprocki and also at Social Policy Research Associates, and yeah, work on SNAP ENT research, and I'm excited to talk to you all today.
Okay, great. So we'll hear from both Madeline and Ann in just a couple minutes. I just want to go over some of the training objectives for today. We are going to do an overview of the best practices study that Ann and Madeline worked on, and they're going to share some different case management models, work-based learning strategies, and then we're going to break out into some smaller group think tank sessions to talk about some of these models and strategies. And then we'll come back to the main group and do some report out of some of those discussions that the small groups had. And then we're going to kick it off by doing just a short poll. We're going to have two poll questions that are going to pop up. Let me go ahead and launch the poll. And this is anonymous, so feel free to answer as honestly as possible. So that you should have a box that popped up that says, what are you most interested in learning about today? And you can pick case management models, work-based learning strategies, both of them, or I don't know. And any of the answers are perfectly fine. Once it looks like the answers are kind of slowing down, I'll go ahead and end the poll and share results of the first question. Okay, looks like we might be slowing, well, okay, slowing down just a little bit. So I'll go ahead and end the poll so we can take a look. And it looks like the majority are very interested in learning about both of these. So about the case management models and work-based learning strategies. And for those that answered, I don't know, that's perfectly fine as well. Hopefully, as we dive into some of the content, you'll get a better feel for what you're most interested in. And I'm going to go ahead and launch the second poll. And this poll is, what do you see as the greatest challenge in implementing new strategies for SNAP ENT? And again, this is anonymous. The choices are state or federal policy limitations, staffing or resources, lack of knowledge on how to implement the strategies, that you don't really see that there's a need to implement new strategies, or you don't really know. And again, any of these are fine. Hopefully you'll be able to have some more discussion on some of these challenges later on in some of our activities. And once the answer starts slowing down, I'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results. Okay, it looks like it's slowing down a little bit. So let's go ahead and end and share. So it looks like there's, it's pretty even between the state and federal policy limitations and staffing resources in the 30%. Also lack of knowledge of how to implement is pretty high as well. And again, for those that aren't really sure, hopefully as you're hearing more, you'll be able to think about some of these challenges that you might have in implementing some of these new strategies. Okay, well, great. I'm glad everybody was able to participate in those and get some good feedback so we get an idea of what you guys are thinking of interest and what challenges you might be thinking about. We'll go ahead and get started in the presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Anne.
Great. Thank you so much, Dallas. Yeah, so I'm excited to talk to you all today. The information that we're sharing comes from, as Dallas mentioned, this best practices and SNAP ENT study that Madeline and I worked on for FNS. And this was published just this past year in February, and it's something that the Farm Bill requires happen every 5 years. So there was a previous study to this one 5 years ago as well. We're going to put a link in the chat to the study so that if you're interested in learning more, you can read it. You can, there's an executive summary to it as well if you just kind of want a shorter take on it, but feel free to check that out. Basically what the resource is an extensive literature review. So I think there are 105 or more sources in it. And it basically, we look at studies that find programs or models or strategies that are effective for increasing employment, wages, or training for SNAP ENT participants or for people who are kind of similar, so low-income individuals in the United States. And the reason we go beyond just SNAP ENT participants is that there haven't been so many studies on SNAP ENT. So kind of broaden it, and that also gives us, we can learn from other people in other programs as well. So this is specifically on research from 2016 to 2020. And if you're interested in older research, you can look back at the 2015 version of this as well. And this version looks at a lot of policies and strategies and programs, but specifically things focused on case management, strategies to improve referral and retention, and promising work-based learning strategies like apprenticeships that seem to be of interest to everyone. So we're going to go through case management and work-based learning and share some examples. So I'm not going to focus too much on the details of the studies. Just know that we chose policies and strategies and programs that were shown to be promising or effective. And if you want more of those details, then you can look in our report or the links that we'll be sharing all along. So we can move to the next slide. Let's see. Thank you. So yeah, I'm going to cover case management. If you look up there, the first bullet is just really generally, there's been some recent research showing that having a case manager versus not does lead to increased employment and increased earnings. But today we're going to talk more about some of the more innovative or interesting case management approaches, so brain-based approaches and intrusive advising. So all of the ones that we are going to cover have been shown to be effective in some way. And like I was saying, you can look into the research articles that we will be sharing in the chat if you want more of those details. I just want to let you know, we're going to be covering 4 models pretty quickly and giving you a lot of information. So this is just to get you started thinking about them. You'll probably have questions. We won't necessarily answer those today, but just want you to sort of hear about these options. Some of you may already be using these models and can share with us more about that. And as I said before, these aren't all programs that are currently in SNAP ENT. They might be working with other populations. So you want to start thinking about how you might need to adapt or adjust, or what you can kind of draw from these programs and models, even if they don't quite apply to your situation and context. Then we can move to the next slide. And thanks. So the first case management model we wanted to talk about is trauma-informed care. So we're going to put 2 resources in the chat that you can check out now or later. This is not necessarily a new case management model. You've probably heard of it, but it is newer in workforce services. It started more in the medical field with, say, substance use disorder treatment and mental health counseling. It's basically, it acknowledges that traumatic experiences can negatively affect participant behaviors and their ability to kind of meet goals that they have, and it prepares staff to support participants. So if you actually go to some of the research that we're sharing with you, you can see like that first graphic is kind of an arrow, a process that there's a guidebook specifically to making workforce organizations trauma informed. And so it kind of works you through those steps. So feel free to check that out. But we really think trauma-informed care is interesting and important now, given just the last few years. I mean, COVID, racial discrimination trauma, health trauma, violence trauma, unemployment, people working and schooling remotely. All of this has affected everyone. And then SNAP participants also frequently experience other known traumas, like experiencing homelessness, interacting with the criminal justice system, having substance use disorder. There's also been research that just living in poverty and sort of that state of deprivation can impact your ability to set and meet goals. So this trauma-informed care is really a way to address that. So the example we wanted to share is up there on the slide. It's a trauma-informed approach to apprenticeship that was done in 2018 in Atlanta. It called the Anthem Apprenticeship Program. So this is done by Anthem, the large healthcare organization, and they were specifically interested in connecting former foster youth to IT positions at Anthem in Atlanta. And so it was a partnership between many organizations, including Atlanta Career Rise, which is their public workforce system organization, training partners, of course, Anthem, all sort of interested in supporting these youth into an apprenticeship, or former foster youth into an apprenticeship, and really considering their traumas and how that might impact their ability to succeed. So I guess part of what they did was actually meet with the apprentices and talk about how their exposures to toxic stress, things like housing instability, lack of career options, how they felt about their access to higher education was sort of going to play out in the apprenticeship. And so the apprentices came up with ideas for barriers that they might have, like childcare, transportation, food, housing, and clothing, and kind of what they needed or what would support them. And apparently for Anthem, this was so useful that they ended up responding to some of their concerns, not only for the apprentices, but also sort of brought them organization-wide. So you can hear more or read more about this in some of the links that we provided, but that's just a little taste of trauma-informed care. We can go on to the next slide and the next example, which is motivational interviewing and goal-based coaching. So this is something that as researchers, we've been seeing a lot in the field, both in SNAP E&T programs, and then I've been seeing it in programs that are serving justice-involved individuals. So there's an overlap with SNAP E&T participants sometimes there. But basically it's involving a practice where the participant and the coach work together to partner and set goals, rather than the coach or case manager kind of top-down telling the participant what they expect them to accomplish. And so the theory is that allowing the participant to sort of name their own challenges and strengths and plans will empower them to achieve goals more easily than if the case manager just told them what to do. So the example we wanted to highlight is from Michigan Works Southwest. So they have implemented Goal for It in both their TANF and SNAP E&T program. And Goal for It is a behavioral science informed goal achievement process that Mathematica actually developed. And so within Michigan Works Southwest, the process focuses on the career coaches working with participants to sort of set their goals and make plans, and then to go back and review those goals. And if you're just curious about the intensity, what this involves, apparently the career coaches went through 4 days of training and then did some sort of road test to see how their new skills were working. So we saw some of the material that Michigan Works Southwest uses, and it's like this really nice visual mapping material where they bring this, the coaches show this to the participants and have them sort of start with the future instead of the past. So saying, what are your hopes and dreams? What can we do to help you achieve them? And then they map out a long-term goal, which is where I'm headed in this map. And then the participants themselves come up with potholes, which are things that might get in their way. And then also, how will I respond, or detours. So they think ahead of time about what could, cause them to struggle or not meet their goals. And the coaches can help them think about what supports are available through the organization so that they can achieve these goals. At Michigan Works Southwest, they also incorporate some trauma-informed approach into that goal-based coaching. So you can see the models aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, and you can kind of take pieces from all of them. So that is that model. We'll move on to the next slide. And again, I know these are really short snippets and a lot of information, but we just wanted to get you a taste of what's out there and what some of you are probably already doing. And you can get more in the links. So this third model is the individual placement and support, or IPS. This has been around for a while too, but less in workforce, just general workforce, and more specifically working with people with serious mental illness. It's been proven to be really effective for people with schizophrenia, spectrum disorder, bipolar, depression, and it has given them basically, they find regular jobs of their choosing, and then they have supports, mental health supports and others to kind of maintain in those jobs. There's a focus on rapid job search and targeted job development, the client preference sort of guiding decisions, and then individualized long-term supports that really meet their specific needs and help them in the job. So it has been, like I said, working with people with serious mental illness, but now it's expanding to other populations, including TANF, people experiencing homelessness, refugees, and older adults. So SNAP-E&T is an area that might fit into this as well. And so the example that we have for this model is in Minnesota. It's a small program for people with disabilities who are also on TANF, and it really, I think, focused on co-locating services for them, including mental health services, employment services, and then this personalized rapid job search and planning all in one space, and kind of really gave them a lot of support. And apparently there were really positive outcomes for people in that program. So you can look at the links we sent for more information on IPS, but I think we can move to the next slide to intrusive advising. Thanks. So this is a model that draws from college and sort of the academic system, so colleges and universities, community colleges, that's been going on for a while there. It's another case management type model that it's usually like career advisors or academic advisors or coaches using it. So the example I have up there is 4 Years for You in the University System of Georgia. What happens is that it's intrusive because the participant doesn't reach out for the coaching, but rather the advisor or career advisor reaches out to participants that are kind of flagged as maybe needing extra support. In this example, 3 weeks into the semester, so pretty early on, these coaches send an email to faculty and ask if they've had any students who say, didn't show up to class often or didn't do well on their quizzes. And then the advisors or coaches will specifically reach out to those students and offer them support. They'll text them, they'll email them, they'll try different methods of getting in touch. And this is something that can really help with retention in classes and even graduation. Sometimes some big data is used with this as well. Arizona State University is known for this. They have a huge student body and a lot of data that they've been tracking. So they've actually kind of explored the data and kind of automated quote unquote red flags of people who might be at risk for not continuing the program. So they even know down to like, oh, this chemistry exam, if you get a B- on it, you are more likely to drop out, even something that might not seem like it would be a big deal. So the career advisors or the academic advisors reach out to those students and really offer them support and are able to keep people retained and graduating. So I know SNAP-E&T isn't necessary. People do, of course, do education and training, but this might be an area where case managers could take on some of this sort of selecting certain red flags or reasons why certain participants might benefit from extra support. So that's the fourth model we wanted to talk about. And again, these are just little tastes and you can learn more by looking at the links. Now we're going to move on to the work-based learning that Madeline will talk to you about.
Thanks, Anne. This is kind of a big shift from talking about case management, which, as you all know, is a required component in all SNAP-E&T programs now. So I think there's certainly a big market for in the program for people looking for effective ways to provide it. Subsidized work-based learning is a newer, I would say, component for SNAP ENT, and one that is optional. So not all of your programs will be implementing it, but it's something that's exciting and has a lot of evidence related to it. Caleb just put in the chat the link to the guidance. I think it's so comprehensive and helpful, and has a lot of answers to a lot of questions, and has definitions about what subsidized work-based learning is in SNAP ENT. And so I encourage everyone, if it's not already in your key documents, to add it to that folder. You know, subsidized work-based learning is a lot of different things. It can be either pre-apprenticeships, apprenticeships, as we mentioned here, but also internships, paid or unpaid internships, and incumbent worker training, on-the-job training. There's a lot of different definitions for this, and a lot of different kinds of programs. Two types of work-based learning that have been tested for their effectiveness that we write about in the report that we're discussing are subsidized employment and registered apprenticeship. Registered apprenticeship is comprehensive, formal, workplace-based training supplemented by classroom training developed through a close public-private partnership of government, firms, unions, and training institutions. Pre-apprenticeship are programs that prepare individuals to meet the entry requirements in order to succeed in apprenticeship programs, and are often a kind of sweet spot for SNAP ENT. So I'm going to talk about these different, a few examples of these different programs. And first, on the next slide, we're sharing with you a newly released report by Mathematica that's part of, if you want to change the slide, that'd be great, part of the SNAP Employment and Training Pilot Study. That this one took place in Fresno and included subsidized employment. While there weren't strong findings in this particular case of big changes in people's work status or earnings, there were a lot of lessons learned that other programs can profit from. And so I put a few of those points up here from the study. I really want to emphasize that these programs require close partnerships with employers and other employment service providers in the area. And so it really, when you're putting together these programs, you need to pay attention to the labor markets and look where entry-level jobs are scarce, or there's a specific industry need for positions that require short-term skills training. Another issue that was brought to the surface in this pilot was the differences between SNAP ENT and TANF subsidies being an issue in Fresno. Another one is that you really have to market these programs to employers and work with the business community in order to be sure that these are continuing to meet the needs of employers. And finally, matching the right candidate to the right subsidized employment position was key. So take a look at this report, and we can talk about it more too in our breakout rooms. But going on to the next slide, I'll just say a little bit about pre-apprenticeship. As I mentioned, pre-apprenticeships are programs that prepare people to meet the entry requirements for and to succeed in apprenticeship programs. It really integrates instruction in basic skills like math with industry-specific lessons like training on how to measure specific aspects of a piece of metal that you've just stamped out of a machine. So it really takes the basic math skills and applies them to a very specific industry skill. And it assists low-income individuals, especially women, people of color, and people with no job experience, to help level the playing field and build supportive networks so that they can succeed in mainstream employment. This example is of a great partnership between the Hershey Company and Wilson Workforce and Rehabilitation Center in Virginia. It's a 16-week pre-apprenticeship program that helps participants master core manufacturing, warehouse, and their basic employability skills, getting to work on time, how to comport yourself in the work environment. And then after they graduate from this program, Hershey considers these candidates for entry into their industrial manufacturing technician apprenticeship. There's a great podcast that Caleb has put the link into here that really brings this example alive that you could use in a training or to share with folks in your state, where a participant is interviewed and talks about how they really overcame a lot of anxiety and depression to realize that they could get a driver's license and get a job. So it's a really inspiring example, and I think has a lot of lessons that can be brought to bear in other situations. Finally, just to talk a little bit more about registered apprenticeships, on the next slide, we wanted to share an example of an apprenticeship model called Treehouse that actually has a preliminary 6-month self-paced course attached to it. Caleb put a link in the chat. It comes from this really very helpful report called Growing Diversity, Equity and Diversity Through Apprenticeship that was released and reviewed in our research overview. So the really unique feature of this apprenticeship is the preliminary 6-month self-paced series of pre-apprenticeship is done online and at the participant's own pace. Further, Comcast partners with this apprenticeship to provide laptops and internet connections so that people's economic situation doesn't prevent them from being able to participate. And because it's flexible, this training can be done while people are working in other jobs or providing care for young children or older adults in their homes. Another key aspect of this is providing mentors so that each participant during the self-paced course has someone to call on to help them master the content and move forward along the way. So again, that's just a taste of work-based learning strategies, registered apprenticeships, pre-apprenticeships, and we'd be happy to stop right now and answer any questions before we move on to our activity that Caleb is going to lead us through.
So I have not seen any questions in the chat, but if anybody has any questions on any of the content that Anne or Madeline shared, you can either add to the chat now or you can unmute and ask your question. We'll wait just a minute or so to see if anybody has any questions. Okay, if none, we will go ahead and move forward, but we should have time at the end. So if you have additional questions that you're kind of thinking of during the breakouts, you can ask, there'll be time to do some of that as well. But at the end, we will have some time if you have, again, some questions that pop up about the content shared. And we'll turn it over to Caleb.
Thanks, y'all. I imagine that many of you didn't realize that you would be doing wind sprints when you came this morning, but we just lobbed, as a matter of fact, I specifically just lobbed a whole lot of links and resources in the chat at you. So thank you all for bearing with that, putting up your hands and catching all of those. The chat, just so folks are aware, can be saved. Everybody can save them. We'll make these resources and whatnot available to everybody after the fact, of course, but you can also download the chat if you'd like to save and refer back to those links or those resources at a later time as well. Perhaps Dallas or one of my colleagues, when you have a chance, just very brief instructions on how people can save the chat. So if they want to go back and catch those links later, they can do so. What I want to do actually is slow the tempo down just a little bit because we've been racing through all of these examples of some really innovative and excellent work that's happening across the country, and give us an opportunity to just digest a bit of what we've heard and to consider how these strategies and the lessons might apply to our own states. And we're going to do this activity by borrowing from an approach that's informed by the human-centered design process. We're not going to be going into a formal human-centered design process. We're just borrowing from it. But for folks that are unfamiliar with it, human-centered design is an approach to problem solving that's conducted in concert with the communities that are being served. And when conducted in a comprehensive manner, a manner that we're not going to be doing right now, design teams can often arrive at surprising or innovative solutions that are desirable and feasible and viable for the communities that are going to be using them. So like I said, we don't have time to do that now. We're only going to get about a half hour or so to tinker around and think about some things and reflect on what we've learned. But we're going to borrow an HCD, a human-centered design mindset, as we think critically about the strategies that Anne and Madeline have been sharing with us. So let's do that. Let me first just introduce this human-centered design mindset. And again, I know some of this is going to be a little bit old hat for some of you, because human-centered design is a strategy that's been around for quite some time. But this is just a snapshot of some of what goes into it. All right, and I'm going to actually ask all of us, we are all, to a certain degree, experts in our work, certainly at local and at state levels across the country. We are, in some cases, we actually may help to deliver ENT services for folks. In a lot of cases, we are supporting a network of service providers who are ensuring that folks across the country have access to services. What we're going to be doing, though, we're going to get into this mindset. We're going to take off our admin hat, maybe dust off our scalps or our hair or whatnot, splash some proverbial water on our face, and get into an optimistic and empathetic mindset, because it's something that's required by human-centered design. This idea of thinking about challenges and thinking about how to overcome hurdles that are sometimes can seem intractable requires a bit of optimism. It requires a mindset of experimentality. The approach is one where we are making and tweaking and adjusting and improving and really just being implementers and innovators in an itinerant process or in a step-by-step process. And I also just want to flag that we embrace ambiguity too, and trust the process in general. This sort of mindset, this sort of activity that we're going to engage in is going to be messy, and that's okay. As a matter of fact, that's desirable because it's through messiness and things that can seem like clutter that some of the most wild and interesting ideas and questions and thoughts can really unearth. So this is an opportunity for you to imagine, to make proverbial mistakes, although that's not really possible in today's session, to generate, to churn, to let go, and to learn from one another. So let's do that. So just a quick reflection, because we dashed through it super quickly. These are the 6 strategies that we specifically called out. Of course, there's more, as Madeline and Anne had spoken to, but these are the ones that we're going to look at today. We've discussed 2 broad strategies today, the case management strategies and work-based learning strategies. And as state leaders and policymakers and administrators, you're supporting programs that serve individuals both in the mainstream as well as those on extremes of the spectrum. So we want to set policies and provide technical assistance and guidance that serves extreme users, not just the middle or the mainstream user. The idea being that what suits an extreme user will nearly certainly also work for the majority of other people. So in a moment, what's going to happen is you're going to select one strategy that we've discussed today, one of these 6 strategies that are up here on the screen, and join a breakout room that's focused on just thinking about that one particular strategy. And you'll want to think about that strategy and all the people who might be impacted by that particular strategy, all the folks that may come in and be served by your service providers or perhaps even by your own agency. And we want to spend some particular attention thinking about extreme users in particular, and thinking about how the guidance, the technical assistance, the work that we do will be in service to extreme users. That extreme user could really fall on a variety of spectrums. There's certainly variety. You know, for instance, we could be thinking about particularly young recipients of services or older recipients of services. We could be thinking specifically about single parents, about individuals with other types of barriers such as disability, or perhaps folks who were previously involved in the justice system in some way, shape, or form. So, so thinking with that mindset, though, can help uncover ideas that might have not been apparent otherwise. We're going to be using Zoom. Obviously, we're on Zoom right now. And so when we shift into the breakout rooms, we're going to you're going to have a pop-up that'll allow you to select one of these 6 rooms, and that's the room you're going to go in. And one flag that I just want to raise is that we have roughly about 100 people that are on the line. We're going to do our best to keep the rooms more or less balanced. In other words, we don't want a room that's going to have 5 people and another room that's going to have 50. I don't think that's going to happen. I think naturally we're going to really kind of spread out between these 6 rooms, but I want to reserve the right to potentially tap people on the shoulder and move them to another room, ask them which room they might want to move to instead of, if there's one that's particularly heavy or one that's particularly light. Okay. Okay. Can we jump to the next slide real quick? So this is how we're going to participate. What you're going to be doing is assembling as your breakout room, as a room together. You're going to be assembling a set of questions, ideally questions, and we're not going to be sticklers about a question format, but a set of questions that you could ask, or that raise to your mind that would relate to problems or challenges or items that you would need to address in your state, in your particular circumstance, that once that question gets answered, would help you develop policies, guidance, technical assistance, or if you are that supports programs that serve individuals receiving ENT services. Or if you are actually a provider, it could be questions that specifically help you to serve participants better. Okay. The point of putting these sorts of assembling a set of questions is because, going back to the HCD mindset, we really want to move away from the notion of identifying reasons why a particular strategy cannot be implemented, and instead think about what is potentially preventing a policy or guidance or technical assistance from being implemented, or what would need to be worked out in order so that that challenge could be overcome. Okay, so the intention is not necessarily that it must be in a question format. We're not Jeopardy here. It's really just to go a step beyond identifying problems and thinking about what needs to be known to overcome those problems or those challenges. And then again, and broadly, the purpose of this exercise is to create space to consider how your state or your area might implement similar strategies or practices to the 6 that you heard from Anne and Madeline just a moment ago. The aim here is in your room together to come away with a broad set of questions or ideas that can serve as a starting point for you and your colleagues and your fellow stakeholders to pursue future action. So we're just asking for questions here. We are not answering questions necessarily. That's not the point of what we're meaning to do. We're not installing new policy pillars today. We're not even chiseling the stone for the policy pillar. We're barely even sketching a design. What we're doing is we're taking stock of our knowledge and our resources and asking what else we might need in order to get there. And then lastly, I just want to flag one approach that might be useful to this is going to be to start thinking broadly, thinking about broad questions, and then narrow or refine as you add questions to the list. And so to do this, I think it might be helpful just to give you a quick snapshot of the tool that we're going to be using to do this. So I'm actually going to ask my colleague Dallas if she could stop sharing for a moment, and I am going to share my screen. We're going to be using something called Jamboard. And so this is what Jamboard looks like. This is a Google tool, and we'll provide links so you can access it, but this is all public. And you'll notice whichever room that you went to, you'll get a link in a moment that'll lead you directly to your room, okay? But let's say you selected trauma-informed care as a strategy that you want to engage with. You have instructions up here in the left-hand side that'll say you're going to select the sticky note, and the sticky note, there's keywords here, but there's also on the left-hand side, you'll see these set of tools. And this middle one here, this little transparent or clear square, that's the sticky note. And it's going to bring up a little pop-up that says sticky note. The cursor is clicking, and you can start typing question. Can type question / idea. Okay. If you so choose, if you want to make yours a different color, you can pick colors, but the colors don't really matter. And once you do that, you click save. Your writing goes away. You click back into the room, and you have your question now on the screen. It can be moved around if you want. You can leave it where it is. Each room is going to have a facilitator. I'll be in one room. My colleagues Dallas and Anne and Madeline will be in rooms, as well as a couple of others who are on the call with us today. Gretchen from Mathematica, as well as my colleagues Vince and Kristen, will also be in rooms. We'll help kick off or get ideas flowing. We'll help organize the questions, the ideas that come to your mind. But the objective here is just to throw as many questions or as many ideas against the wall as possible. There is literally no wrong answer. It's fine if there's duplicates. The point of this exercise, of what we're going to be doing, is a brainstorming exercise where our goal is to just create as many sticky notes as possible. And then, given time, start to categorize or organize these ideas together. Okay, and your facilitator will help you in your room, will help you move from questions to categorization, et cetera, as you get there. They can also help folks navigate and figure out the Jamboard if you need, once you get to that point. Okay. Are there any, I'm going to stop sharing here, and are there any final questions or thoughts that folks want to pop either into the chat or uplift? How long in the room? Okay, we're going to have, let's see, checking the time, just about 20 minutes or so in the room. Okay, we might get a few more minutes. We'll be chatting in a back chat between all of the facilitators, and if conversations are really just flowing, we'll keep things going a little bit longer. But we're going to do this for a little bit, gather as much content or ideas or questions as possible, and then we're going to come back very briefly, share out from each room, 30 seconds or so to present, just the general concepts or ideas that were floated in the room itself, and share back with everybody so everyone can see the sorts of ideas that were developed across the country from participants in all sorts of states, focused on that particular strategy. All right, some of us are starting to come back, and more will come back, I'm sure, as we get, as the time expires on the rooms that are probably still talking and working. And Dallas, I'm happy, it might be useful to actually share the Jamboard screen, which I'm happy to do if you would like me to.
Sure, yeah, I'll stop sharing and you can pull up the Jamboard.
Okay. Oh my gosh, look at all these. This is amazing. Okay. And where are we at on timing? Now that I'm sharing, I actually can't tell if everybody's back yet or not.
The rooms are closed, so everyone should be back.
Great, okay. First of all, oh my gosh, that was quite a bit of a crash course in my room. I imagine others as well. I mean, just looking at this first slide that looks very full. So this first group was trauma-informed care, and I want to just give folks 30 seconds to a minute. You do not need to read off every sticky note, but just a snapshot on the conversation points that were raised, maybe kind of the categories that uplifted through the questions that people were putting up, or the conversation that happened, if conversation happened. So is there a trauma-informed care representative who would be brave enough to unmute themselves and give us an overview of this slide?
Hi,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Margaret.
this is Margaret Rosenthal from Wisconsin. And yeah, there was a high interest in this topic for sure. And a lot of really thoughtful, thought-provoking questions came out of it. You know, some of it has to do with like, how do you assess it? And how do you take into consideration equity and diversity and, you know, different target populations, just how to use it effectively, staff training, where are we going to find this excellent training? How are we going to get our vendors to buy into it, those who are a little bit more resistant? You know, what best practices, a lot of interest in best practices as well. And what obstacles are, you know, what might we face in terms of obstacles? So that just gives you kind of a general idea.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Margaret. It looks like you had a robust conversation. That's perfect.
That was great.
Okay, let's move forward to motivational interviewing and goal-based coaching. Who's the brave one?
There are a couple of people that we're going to just share. We had a really thoughtful discussion, and I think Cindy was going to share something.
Thank you. So one of the things we were talking about is how the COVID had changed the way we work with individuals and the way we approach individuals. Sometimes working electronically or over distance with individuals, we have to look at how do you motivate those individuals in that manner. And sometimes you find, especially people of a younger generation, are more apt to reach out electronically. And they may be more willing to be motivated or to share what's really going on with them when they're not face to face with an individual. So updating or changing the way we approach things in a motivational way, utilizing things we've learned during these last 2 years.
And another really good nugget, Alicia had one.
Yes, so talking about those that are, you know, our staff that are engaging this motivational interviewing and how they can at times become tired or tired out when they're engaging in this type of interviewing and setting goals, and perhaps the ones that they're working with are not as engaged or are not meeting goals. And so that can be difficult to stand up for a long period of time and to maintain that level skills that were taught when they're not seeing perhaps the fruitage of it. And so how do we really work with them and encourage them and keep that going?
Great. Also, it seems quite robust, and this is a nice virtual poster paper. Thank you very much, Motivational Interviewing. And let's move forward to, this is Individualized Placement and Supporter, IPS. This was my group. And I think Anne had agreed to speak for us. So let me turn it to Anne.
Hi. So we at first we just wanted to, we broke it down into 4 categories, and we came up with some definition questions, like what is IPS? Is there specific criteria? What were some challenges that the use of IPS and how are these challenges mitigated? Then we moved over to sustainability. You know, what does this look like long term? About the staffing, training, you know, and then also about the data piece, how to collect the data. Data is always a hot topic, you know, with all the things that we do. And then how the state can assist in providers setting up if IPS is not in place. Then we moved over to partnerships and funding. Just how, like, maybe how can the community colleges use IPS? How might providers determine when implement IPS versus specific aspects of the customized employment? And then we also had just the landscape of long-term like funding, or someone added a thing on me. Landscape of best practices and way to implement that, and then given the highly customized approach, how IPS be integrated with a component. Just to, you know, there's a lot of different questions going on there, and I think we had a good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. And we had a hidden hero, design hero in the background, also making this look very nice. And I'm not even sure how they did all of the things in here, but whoever that was, thank you so much too. This is excellent contribution. Okay, let's move forward to intrusive advising. And Anne, I don't know if there's anyone from your group that is willing to be brave and speak a little bit about some of the ideas that were raised in your group.
Yeah, is there anyone who wants to share? If not, I'm also okay to summarize, but yeah, I want to give you all an opportunity. All right, I think this topic, there was people kind of wanted details on what it was, big picture, and also I think there was an interesting question that people raised about whether this makes sense for SNAP ENT. So I don't know, there's a pink Post-it note on the far side that says some campuses have moved more towards appreciative advising. So I thought that was interesting. Like, is this even the right approach? So those 2 on the side are kind of like big picture, what is this and how could it be applied to SNAP ENT? And then on the other side are kind of more detailed questions about like, what, you know, is it the financial department that would be implementing this in the colleges? What actions or behaviors will trigger an action to take? So yeah, I think this seemed like it was maybe a newer type of model that hasn't maybe been used in SNAP ENT programs as much. So we were kind of thinking like just whether it would even fit in. So thanks to my group for being willing to experiment on something like this.
That's great. And sometimes just having that early conversation and healthy skepticism is actually really valuable and critical too. So a worthwhile question to even raise at the outset. Thanks to everybody in that group. And let's go to subsidized employment. We're starting to near the end. So anybody from this group brave enough to share a little bit about some of what you spoke about and wrote about?
So I think I got nominated at the end to summarize, but I would help if Sarah or Bessie wants to jump in. You had a lot to share with the group. I think primarily what we talked quite a bit about was the fact that participants will likely lose SNAP benefits if they accept a subsidized employment. And just whether they can continue in SNAP, whether they can continue in SNAP ENT, and what that looks like, and how you know they and employers need more guidance around that. And then I think a broader conversation we had around how do you identify partners, what kind of partners can be included and not included, what kind of strategies can you use for reaching out, and then how do you reduce burden for employers to actually come on and work with states. But Sarah, Bessie, please jump in if you have anything else to share.
I think you covered it beautifully, Gretchen. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. You did an awesome job.
Thanks, guys.
It takes a team. Excellent. Thank you all. Okay, and let's go to the last group, which was around registered apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship. Oh, and a similar design layout. I love it. And who is the brave soul to share with us some of this conversation?
We didn't get to nominate anyone, so I don't want to put anyone on the spot, although I will let them add and enrich this. This is Vince. We had a great group, and we did borrow from the other team in terms of design, so that we'll admit to that. So there's 4 areas, and I would say the biggest heat was generated by the discussion on the far right around preventing benefit cliffs. So one of the good things about apprenticeship is that it generates income, but that also creates problems in terms of benefit, the possibility of a benefit cliff and reduction in benefits. So there was that was seen as a major issue, especially in areas where minimum wages are quite high. So finding ways to deal with that. There's some state policy considerations at the top, who to connect with. There's some startup issues at the bottom, including, there are some programs that are well known and others that are not so well known in the registered apprenticeship field. One way of dealing with the benefit cliff that was discussed was the idea of, doing it more as a pre-apprenticeship, perhaps not, pre-apprenticeship that feeds into an apprenticeship, which then gets picked up, and there are other support services that could be picked up if and when the ENT benefits run out. And there's one idea about, or one question about how do we track the success of programs. So anything I missed by those folks, Miranda or Corinna or others? All right, so that was us.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. And I appreciate everybody for contributing and really taking time to sort of step back and out of our day-to-day and think about some ideas. The intent, just as a reminder, what we've just collected up and what we have here is really meant to be just a starting point for all of us, frankly, even if it's not the room that you were working in. If these strategies are of interest, obviously the research and resources that we provided in the chat can be of a benefit, but so can this as well, because we just had contributions from minds all over the country in different states who are seeing common barriers and challenges and topic areas to overcome or to address in order to institute these strategies. So this is a starting point for you to advance that work, should you so choose. And I will turn it back, I believe, to my colleague Dallas.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the last hour and a half of their time to listen to the content in the presentation and really start thinking about some of these questions on how you might be able to approach some of these strategies in implementation. I did want to point you to the chat. Sean did flag an FNS announcement on SNAP ENT data grant. So you might want to take a look at that. That might be something of interest for you. And also wanted to let you know that we will have materials available. So we'll have a recording of this available for you along with the slides, and we will pull together all of the information added to those Jamboards in an easier format for you to look at. So you will get those questions back to you so you can take a look at those. Once we're done today, once you close out, you'll get a pop-up survey. It's just asking some questions about today's training. Just want to get some feedback from you all to make sure that we're incorporating those in future trainings. And then also just wanted to flag that there are 2 additional trainings that will be coming up in the next couple of months. The next one's actually July 12th. And you should have received that link to register when you received the link for this one. That training will be focused on marketing and recruitment for SNAP ENT. And then the next training will be in September, on September 14th, that will focus on community college partnerships. So take a look at those and register if you are interested. And again, make sure you fill out that survey so we make sure we get your feedback as we're planning future trainings. And again, just wanted to thank everybody. We do have a few minutes left, so if there are any questions anyone has that we could answer, I'm happy to reserve the last couple minutes answering any questions. And if there are none, then we will give you a couple minutes back on your back in your day. And remember to, before you hop off, if you want to save those links in the chat right now, you can go ahead and save that chat. But again, we will be providing those links to you when we get the materials out. Okay, thank you, everyone.